Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. There's a psychology involved of those who sit in the front and those who sit in the back. We have everyone kind of piled on the left here. I don't know what that means, but maybe political persuasion. I don't know. So, thank you for taking the time being here for this. What is kind of the official back to school, state of the school address that I do each year, where I talk about what we're doing and what's on offer and the exciting things that we're doing at ASD. I am going to, as I've done before, though, pay special attention to the why. I think it's really important to understand the context of why we're making changes and why we feel urgency. And we're also going to give you an opportunity later to participate and offer some opinions on what we're doing, which I love about this community. You never shy about offering opinions about what we're doing, which is fine. So as I said, this really Talk Tuesdays, and if you're new to ASD, how many are brand new to ASD? Oh, fantastic. We have this series of talks on Tuesdays. It's anything from what's going on in middle school math to how to read map results to things like this. So there'll be a regular rhythm of Tuesdays, and I hope you avail yourself to them because it's a lot of good information gets passed along in this forum. So, of course, we are a mission-driven school. If you're new to the school, I hope you've already heard reference to the mission many times in just your few weeks here. This is a school as committed to its mission as any that I've ever been at. And, of course, all schools say they have a mission, but schools to live it and to make sure that every decision is driven through this mission to make sure that your children can have dreams and that they're set up to achieve them. And really, we're going to unpack this a little bit more in a minute. I'm particularly interested in this idea of passionate learner, ready to adapt and contribute in this rapidly changing world. We're actually going to start with rapidly changing world. This is a huge challenge for schools. If schools are just doing the same old, we're really doing in service to your children because that world is so different. This world is so different than the one we entered when we were done with school. And again, our slogan, really, every student future ready. That's what you pay us with your hard-earned dollars to prepare your child for their future, whatever it may be. And we hope there are many, many options available to your children. So just a little bit about me. If we haven't met yet, spent really childhood and into adulthood in the Boston area. Had my state education, my Ivy League education, my Jesuit education at these institutions, which is a nice balance. So enjoyed, but again, you can see very local. I was a high school principal in the Boston area in one of the suburbs for 5 years. Before that, principal on Nantucket Island. And then we decided to raise our kids overseas. So kind of got out of that world to this adventure, and we went to London first, so I was principal of the American School in London. And then we decided to get adventurous and went to Saudi Arabia for 4 years in the Eastern Province, where I led a group of 7 nonprofit schools. And then, of course, we were ready to try somewhere new. Promised our kids, I promised Tina there in the back, we wouldn't be in Saudi forever. So we looked all over. We're like, we're going to go to Japan, we're going to go to Switzerland, and our number one choice was Dubai. So the region was maybe didn't tick all of our wildest dreams, but this was the school we wanted to be because we heard the reputation of the community, and the work was essentially, we want somebody to really mobilize the community and start to modernize the school. ASD's reputation worldwide was a very, very good school, but in a traditional model. And the board wanted more, and I appreciated that opportunity. And we're in this position now, entering my 3rd year, where we're really mobilizing a lot of good changes, which we'll get to a bit later. So it's my 7th year as a superintendent. It's important to know that I'm a reformer. I'm not somebody who's just going to come to a school and just keep everybody happy and keep things going forward. My whole career has been about changing schools to give students what they need and what they deserve. And then I have 2 passion projects, my kind of 20%. First one's around differences, really global citizenship, race and culture. So for the last 7 or so years, this is a course I developed at ASL. So I teach a high school second semester course in race and culture for juniors and seniors. So if you have students of that age, it's a social studies elective. Please have them consider that. And then mindfulness has also been a passion of mine for quite a while. My dissertation in the Boston area was around the stress culture of high schools. Just students chasing the perfect transcript, the perfect university, and what the effect on well-being was for those students. Obviously, some of you may have come from communities like that. Some of you may be experiencing that here at ASD. It's a huge issue in the States and the Far East and all over the world. So anyways, that's just a little bit about me. So we're going to do a little quiz here. I want you to guess what I'm describing. So a place where individuals are placed for rehabilitation. Times carefully regulated and prescribed. Tension focused on the individual. The inhabitants are confined for most of the day, right? So there's some, but we build in a little bit of time at this institution for some outdoor time, maybe a little social interaction. But most of the time they're confined to small spaces. But they're very carefully monitored, especially when they're out of these spaces. And particularly watching interactions between individuals. And then most of the choices are actually made by the supervisors. So what am I describing?
Scary, a prison and a school.
Yeah, a prison. So all you need to do to change this into a traditional school is to replace rehabilitation with learning and supervisors by teachers and other adults. So obviously, this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek. The more traditional comparison has been schools as factories. And for many, many years, schools produced middle-level managers, people who could just do what they were told to do, not a lot of thinking involved. And it worked really well. In fact, all industry wanted us to do is they wanted us to produce a certain type of student, do what you're told, basically, and we want them sorted. So high schools were often called the great sorting machines. By the time we were done with high school education, we had 1 through 100, 1 through 1,000, we had everybody ranked. And then universities could pick some and industry would take the rest. Unfortunately, a lot of schools, and even we have some components of this at ASD, are positioned and structured to produce a certain type of a student. Schools like treating children as raw products like nails, where the government and the industry is saying, do this. Now, I think the government and the industry right now are shrugging their shoulders because they don't know exactly what kind of student they need. But we'll unpack that as we go forward. So I want to highlight these parts of the mission, which are so critical, and that is really, these are the parts that keep us up at night. We're not worried about challenging the students, although we always want to do better with that. We work hard to inspire and motivate them. But how do we make sure that they're able to adapt, and what kind of world are they actually entering, and how do you prepare someone for jobs that haven't been created yet, for breaking technologies that haven't even been coded yet? How does a school do that so that we don't always fall behind in doing this? And I remember reading Thomas Friedman, who does a lot of good writing. Last year, I think I recommended Thomas Friedman book about just the way the world is now. And when we were in school, this is kind of how it worked. There were jobs that were high pay and they required high skill level. There were lots of jobs, particularly in the middle class, where you could have relatively low skills and you still received a very healthy wage, and you could have a nice middle class lifestyle and go on holidays and send your kids to college. There weren't a lot of high skill jobs that had low pay. It was pretty fair compensation. And then of course there's always been low skill, low pay jobs. What the situation is now, so their world is our children, and of course I have 2 high school children, so we think about this quite a bit. There still are high skill, high pay jobs, but some of these are looking very, very different. The most high skill, high pay jobs many of them are unfilled. There are 85 million tech jobs that aren't filled because there aren't enough people with the type of skills to fill these high-paying jobs, but they're still out there. There are no more low-skill, high-paid jobs. There are very, very few. This right here explains why the political situation around the world is so unstable. This, I think, explains the 2016 election in the United States. The middle class no longer can have the type of lifestyle that they once had because these jobs are either going elsewhere or they're just no longer exist. And you've got many college graduates, many people going to college and then graduating not only in debt, but with high skills, but don't have many options because their skill set hasn't matched what the industry needs. And of course, there are always low skill, low pay jobs out there. This change is monumental. It's huge, and it has huge implications on schools. I'm going to show you a couple of slides I used last year. This was one of them. This is the idea that there's a human side and there is a machine side. There's no longer this white-collar job, blue-collar job, because machines now are everywhere. And it's when you've been living overseas as long as we have, you notice things when you go back to the States or Canada or elsewhere. One of the things I noticed is, even though we don't go to Chick-fil-A, the restaurant, have you noticed that there's usually one or two workers out at the drive-thru? And they're meeting cars right when they get to the place you order. So the computer is ordering. In fact, you may be ordering it, say you pull up in Boston, but it actually gets sent to a call center somewhere else who organizes the order and then beams it back to the kitchen. But the machines are doing a fair amount of the ordering. The humans now, instead of taking your order, are trying to enhance the customer experience. And that's an example of a low-skill, low-paid job. But the world that our children are going into, they'll be working with machines. So it's not so much replacing humans with machines, but what are humans going to need to do so that they can take these human jobs while the machines do all the automation and things like that. Another example, these are some of the high-paying jobs that are now disappearing. You may remember this slide. So accountants, auditors, financial analysts, lawyers, drivers even. I mean, some of these are very, distinguished professions, but a lot of this is being automated now. A lot of these are the high-skill, high-paid jobs that are starting to disappear because it's shifting over here to some of these new roles. You'll see a lot of mentions to data, AI and machine learning, information technology, robotics, people and culture specialists. This is not just all about technology. Customer service, marketing, communication, things like that. So there's this shift in this industry. These are why some students are not going to college, because they have skills in this right away and they go right into six-figure jobs. And they decide, well, maybe I'll do college later if I feel like it. Because this industry is undersupplied right now. There's still a lot of stable jobs, but this shift is not just new professions, but these less temporary or less permanent jobs. So when we may have had 4 or 5 or 6 different jobs, our children are probably going to have multiple careers. They're just going to switch, and you may have seen some of this in your own children already. So we'll go to what Donna Oram, who's the president of the National Association of Independent Schools, the biggest association for private schools back in the U.S., and had the pleasure of talking to her last year. And really the first revolution was high school becoming available. This was in the 20th century, kind of early, the mid-20th century. High school became accessible. The second big revolution in education was giving access to college, the GI Bill after the war, and just making college accessible to people who normally wouldn't have that route. But we're in the middle of this third educational revolution, and that is learning continuously. So learning when you need it. You know, I want to go for a job or a project. I need to learn a little bit of code, or I need to learn how to work with a Far Eastern culture. I need to be able to learn that so I can be part of the team. I need to be able to find it on my own, to understand what are the options for me, and I need to be able to direct my learning. I need to be able to learn from others, so it's not just this solitary pursuit where you get to have your own little desk and your own relationship with the teacher and you get graded just on your own contribution. The real world, of course, is so much around social learning. And this idea that today you may need to know a little bit of coding, but tomorrow you need to know how to work with Koreans, and then the day after that you may need to know how to work with a machine. How do we prepare our students so that they are adaptable? We'll get to that. But this continuous learning is already what's happening in the real world. It's already required if you're going to have a vibrant career. It's also very daunting, to be honest, because schools are not oriented so much. What we do basically is we say we're going to get to that unit eventually, or just wait and we'll eventually get to that unit that covers, you know, how to build agency. We can't do that. They can't wait. They need to understand this continuously. And I used this quote last year as well, this probably 20-something-year-old who says, really self-motivation is what it's all about. So if knowledge is something that we can access, and is constantly getting updated, and we want to be more creative, it's really about finding that ability to go find it. So getting that motivation. So when we talked about inspire to create passionate learners that our mission speaks to, it is, yes, us inspiring, but it's also that self-motivation. And what's really heartening about students is, I would say a lot of what they're doing now that's outside of the normal curriculum, they are finding themselves and they're coming to us and saying, can I do this? And thankfully, many of the cases we say yes, but we need to do more. This is what I told the admin team the other day. We need to tee it up a lot better. So everything from competitions to new clubs to, you know, new events, opportunities that internships, things that they don't have to find on their own, we should be helping finding for them. And it's really, you know, about this. If you saw some of the recent publications, you'll see this student profile. This student profile, I can't overstate how important it is for us. It's our 5-year vision is to make sure that every one of our students embodies this. It's like a little plant or a little tree there. But you'll see, instead of saying something like, well, we say communicators. So communicating with diverse backgrounds, with different perspectives. It's not just about reading, writing, and arithmetic. Those are still important, and we're still teaching those heavily. But you can see, we also we need our students to be able to do something with that knowledge. We need students to be self-aware. We need students to understand other people and other perspectives. We're an international school. They need to understand differences. And of course, we're trying to help students be resilient so they can adapt if they fall down. So what we did last year is we got together many members of the community. There were some parents involved in this as well, and we rewrote this is essentially a graduate profile. It's a list of skills and characteristics that we want our students to embody. So we created this, and what we're doing this year is basically mapping it K through 12 and making sure we find out what are we already doing well, what do we need to do more of, what do we need to do less of, so there's room for this sort of thing. This is very much based on research and what futurists say our students need. Take a moment and just turn to your shoulder partner, as we call them, and just, what's one thing that jumps out that may surprise you a little bit? And just talk to each other about how you feel about that. we just finished our last talk. Thank you. So, your first reaction, just being totally transparent, my first reaction when I saw this product from the team that worked on this was, feels like some things are missing, especially if you're thinking, well, we want to protect some of the classical or traditional education that we've had, but also introduce these new concepts. But if you look a little deeper, and you look at communication, there is deep commitment to literacy that you need to be a communicator. So it is reading, it's writing, listening, speaking. That is very much going to still be at the core of what we do. You look at global citizenship, globally aware, just globally aware has big implications on how we teach humanities and these interdisciplinary concepts. So in each of these, you will find some of the classical literacies that will continue to be important for us to promote. And then you'll also start to see some new things, maybe self-awareness and resiliency and being compassionate. Those are things maybe that were on the edges of when we went through school. You did an advisory, maybe you did it somewhere else. These are now becoming part of core of what we do. But at our very core, we are still a standard-based liberal arts education and school, and we should be, and we feel that's the appropriate thing to be offering to get your students ready for their world. But there are new literacies coming out that are also important and things that are growth areas for us. We need your students to be better with data, better with statistics. Now, it's fine for them to study calculus, but if they're not studying statistics, they may be missing a really important skill set. It's important that they just understand some of these new literacies that are so important out there. So I mentioned the tech ones, they're the most obvious, but there are others. Cultural competency, how do we understand how to communicate across cultures, understand why people behave the way they do. But was it just a couple of examples? Was there anything that really stood out that either got you excited or a little charged up? Please, go ahead.
I'm just thinking, you're talking about developing, and sorry, this is in no way a criticism or anything. I'm just thinking out loud to see how we can move forward with all this. You want communicators and global citizens, yet our school is so behind on languages compared to many other schools in the city.
Yes.
Especially elementary, where the majority of learning a new language happens. We're talking about self-aware and resilient, where we're currently in an environment, and I know we're moving forward with this new direction, but we're in a state now where teachers are not really giving a lot of feedback in the form of grading or whatever. How can a very young child become self-aware when not given feedback? And then the other one is also self-motivation falls into that as well. And we're still stuck with Common Core standards in math, where I know half of elementaries outside doing additional math in other institutions. We're talking about moving forward, but we're still stuck in the past. So I'd love to know how all of this is going to...
Yeah, good.
I believe it's going to move forward. But my fear is our current kids in elementary are paying the biggest price.
Thank you. There are some really important comments there on issues that get me charged up as well. Americans don't know how to teach language. And my only evidence is that most Americans are still working on English. So we actually talked about this yesterday. Our director of learning, Glenn Carlson, speaks about 6 languages. He's an expert in language. We went around the table and we all admitted that the only language we were all basically failed French students or failed Spanish students from high school. Why? Because we started it in 8th grade and then we, forgot it within a year of leaving high school. I agree 100% that deep language instruction should happen at the elementary school. We are, I don't want to be too harsh, but we are really not satisfied with where we are with Arabic. If you read our report from KHDA, we dispute our good rating because we think it's, that's related to a different issue. But when they say you need to do better with Arabic, we say absolutely do. Absolutely do. Well, yeah. So this is, it's not part of my presentation today, but that one in particular gets a lot of conversation. What was the second part?
The second part was about
feedback.
resilience.
So I also didn't include our three strategic kind of plan pillars, but one of them is around data and feedback. So the reason we're mapping this out is we're actually also committing to gathering more feedback. So not only gathering it and developing new instruments, we're going to take one of these this year and develop a new instrument that will then provide feedback. I'm not sure which one it is yet. But we're committed to not only measuring stuff we haven't before, but reporting it back to you. And then what's most important is that the teachers then look at it and say, oh, I need to do more over here. So we are still stuck in some ways. The hardest of all schools to change is the one that's very traditional. So unfortunately, that's a longer path for us, but we've been working on it this is our third year now. So we should may have a side conversation just some more about what we're doing. But I thank you for bringing that up because we're actually working towards a performance report for the community where we're going to lay kind of bare what we do well, but also the areas we don't, because we feel we should be accountable to you as to what we're doing well, what we're not. So you'll hear more about that later.
So based on that, because I have a child in each division, in the middle school, high school, I think that the teachers also actually are improving giving feedback, and not just directly to the parent, because you kind of take a step back in both of those divisions, but directly to the students, and then that empowers them to have the conversations with the teachers and help try to figure out what's going on, and that's what happens in the real world. So, whereas I feel elementary is getting there, I feel middle school and high school, with the trainings that those teachers have had, or maybe where they've come from, I can see a different impact with those two of getting feedback directly to the student, but also to the parent.
I appreciate that, Nanette, but I think one thing we could do better is if we're giving feedback to your children to let you know, perhaps even later, this is what we said to them. It shouldn't be a secret. Be a secret as to what we've been telling them.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to open it up for questions at the end. Otherwise, I'll never get to the end of the presentation. I want to highlight every year I do a book recommendation, and this is the one I've chosen for this year. This was a book that was just given to me last spring by Lucy Chow. I don't think Lucy's in the room. But I appreciate your book recommendation. So if you ever want to if you see something that you think is going to make an impact on ASD, drop it in my office. I'm happy to do that. So Fuzzy and Techie, Scott Hartley is a kind of venture capitalist in Silicon Valley and has helped a lot of companies get started. Went to Stanford, and when he was at Stanford, there were basically, you can divide Stanford into fuzzies and techies. The fuzzies, of course, are the liberal arts majors, and the techies are the computer science majors. And this, it's basically, he's making a case as to why liberal arts is still important in this digital world. And he draws very specific examples. In fact, one of the examples is the true innovators in Silicon Valley, the ones who are heading these tech companies, they are hiring quite heavily in the liberal arts because they need humans to make sense of this powerful tools that are being coded and created every day. So just a few kind of highlights here. You can see Jack Ma, who just retired from Alibaba. I guess he's on to other things. He was an English major. So the richest man in Asia started a tech company, is an English major. And he speaks to the basically the advantage, the differentiator. If you're trying to say what's going to differentiate my child or me in this market, it's the very thing that we're kind of pushing away from, this liberal arts education. I'll give you some examples of some skills, but these are the things that we feel are going to be differentiators for your children when they go off into the real world. And some of the examples of fuzzy skills, we're going to make this PowerPoint available to you, so don't worry. Creativity, of course. This is just a sample. It's not an exhaustive list. Problem solving, how to understand what's really going on. making decisions. How do you bring a group to a decision, especially if it's cross-cultural? Being able to argue and get what win the argument, win the day. Again, speech and debate. These are, our students are quite passionate about this at ASD. That's different than just arguing. Management, of course, being able to manage people or manage people who are far all across the world, not just, maybe even doing it from your living room because you work remotely. And this is the kind of the big one. The book really, really focuses on this one. How do we behave and why do we behave the way we behave? It's like psychology and sociology, right? These sort of jobs, and so if you're somebody who's developed an app for how to access counseling when you live in a really rural environment, and it's just an example of a big startup recently. How do you access counseling from all over the world if you're in a remote area? They hired a whole bunch of people who would help understand how would somebody interact with this app? How is somebody going to interact with the technology? What sort of follow-up do they need? These are all human questions that humans need to solve because an algorithm is just a code to tell something how to function. But you need that interpretation. Another quote, this comes from an article, Why Top Tech CEOs Want Employees with Liberal Arts Degrees. So as the world becomes more complex, we're training people very much in a specialized model. And this is doing a big disservice. So what the world really needs is this intellectual agility, this creativity and curiosity, so that when new terrain is created or explored, you've got somebody who knows how to think. Again, getting back to this, if I were to sum up exactly what we're trying to do here, we're trying to get everything oriented towards thinking. This is a thinking institution. If it's not, we shouldn't even be in operation. But this is a thinking operation. This is all geared towards thinking. And what the world needs is thinkers. Maybe not computers anymore or being able to, like bean counters or things like that. We need to be able to think. And this idea that algorithms and technology, again, the top CEOs are saying it's human-augmented technology. So how do you deal with issues of privacy, regulation, identity? You can't answer. The machine, AI can't answer that, in fact. So getting a humanities PhD might be the most important thing you do, according to Damon Horowitz, who's a professor and former tech guy. Might be the most important thing you do to be able to write your future. And of course, you can be an engineer. So you can be an engineer, but if you're an engineer that just ignores all the liberal arts courses, you're really doing yourself a disservice. So you can be an engineer, but also make a commitment to the liberal arts, and you'll be just fine. So I want to get into, before we kind of open it up to the next part, what are we doing? So that was just a big case as to why we're changing, why we're trying to mix things up and do things differently. So what we're doing, and I'm going to address the strategic plan, addressing diverse learning needs. So this plays out both with support. So are students learning? This is a question we ask ourselves every day. Are students learning? If they're not, what are we going to do about it? But we also, at the beginning of the year, posed the question to the faculty, what happens when students have already learned it? What are we doing? Are we just focusing on the ones who need more help? We shouldn't be. Yes, we should be focusing on them. We also need to focus on the ones who need more. And this is a big growth area for us, but one we're committing to. We're deepening our relationship with data. We're not going to turn into, where we're just measuring every last thing about your child or turning your child into a number. But we need to do more than what we've been doing. We need to measure some of those things on our student profile. So for this, again, measure, report, and respond, including some things that we haven't before. We've developed data dashboards on your children that has all of their external assessments and also some of their internal assessments, and the teachers get that. And they can look at your child and say, okay, I have a sense of what they're strong at, what we can reinforce, but also what we need to put more attention to. This gets to personalizing learning. And then our mission speaks to this, but the idea that we're actually going to contribute. We're going to do something. We're in a very privileged community and environment. So a commitment to volunteerism, service learning, and of course sustainability has had so much press. And what I love so much about this one are the students are really driving it. I mean, they're coming up to us and saying, you got to get rid of the plastic. And we're saying, yeah, but. And they say, no, you're going to get rid of the plastic, right? And we say, okay. And then they do it, and it happens. And then they write an application or a grant that we, just barely knew about, and then we get awards. So this sort of thing, our students are so hungry and excited for this sort of thing. So we're committing to it. And then you've heard us talk a bit about pathways, which I'm going to focus on now. So pathways are simply this, we offer the standard liberal arts curriculum, but we also want to offer opportunities where you can go deeper. So maybe it's an area of interest or an area of passion, but it's curated, meaning we're going to tee up many more opportunities in these areas. And you can see that, before I show you, well, actually I'll do this. So you remember we had these different pathways. And these top two are areas that we need to do a lot better at. We are under the bar in STEM and business and entrepreneurship. 2 days ago, we had a retreat with some of the high school administration where we visioned what this could look like in the next 3 to 5 years, including what it's going to look like for next year. We need to do a lot more in this. So we also, though, want to support. We have a world-class arts and athletics program, campus rec program. I mean, second to none in my experience. But we want to offer students the ability to go deeper. And what this means is looking at what we require. So this idea of flexibility is a big theme for us. And then we've done quite a bit with global citizenship, and we'll do more. So having the JUMP Foundation join us at ASD, doing some training yesterday for middle school students. This is a partner that I think we're going to get a lot of outcome from. So what it might look like, this is K-12. So we're not going to say we're just going to put all the attention into the high school for STEM. Elementary school, it might just look like exposure. We're exposing our students to, maybe a design competition, or we have our I3 lab. Even our kindergartners have a non-tech kind of makerspace. In the middle school, we might allow them to go a bit deeper, maybe in pursuits or maybe even in their courses. The time you get to the high school, it really should be more experiential. So are you out there in the Dubai community, learning from on these concepts? Are you going to a competition to put into practice what you're learning? So what we're basically doing is we took each of these categories and we say, how far can we get next year? How far did we get this year? And then visioning it all the way through for 5 years. And just some examples of what we've changed already. Right over, and I don't know if you've noticed, but one of the new middle school classrooms on the ground floor is going to be a makerspace. The reason why it's all piled in there is the middle school teachers and administrators want to have the students themselves design that space, so they're going to go through a process of designing that. We have added counseling at the high school and swapped the spaces. We also have these community spaces. We're trying to make it more welcoming for students to just hang out and be together. The paired kindergarten classrooms, you may have heard about this. Tiny bit of controversy. Grade 7 math, you may not know about this, but we identified a problem that to put it bluntly, not enough of our middle schoolers were getting to algebra in middle school. So we realized there were some structural pieces and even some glass ceilings that were not acceptable. So we're opening up 7th grade, and 8th grade will open up as well, probably into next year, so that there's much more fluidity. So students who are capable can rise up and take algebra by the time they're in 8th grade and don't have to wait till high school for that. We have 10 new courses in the high school related to these areas I had on the previous slide. We have some students, middle school students, going to South Africa for a new competition. We had students do the Harvard Innovation Challenge. Harvard wants us to host it in coming years. So we're creating these new partnerships. As I mentioned, leadership training. The libraries have changed dramatically in the last couple of years. The elementary library, you notice walls coming down, new like kiosks and fun areas. High school as well. Probably one of the most popular things in the high school library are those blocks and the sewing machines. This is Maker. So offering more opportunity. The high school really creatively giving more flexibility and ownership to the way lunch and advisory works. So this idea of what I need time in the high school. And I mentioned all the, I didn't put the B's on there, the sustainability, but we got rid of plastics. The solar panels are already installed. We have a plastic shredder, it's like half the size of this room. It makes me a little nervous, but it's coming. And then we have an industrial composter that's been ordered, and we're just waiting for it to arrive. There's much more, but we're just waiting for the kids to tell us what it is. And then just kind of wrapping up here, how are we doing this? It's all about the instruction. Every time I talk to the teachers, it's about the instruction. What's our value added as teachers? Yes, we give feedback. Yes, we care for the students and help them. But we're here to teach. So core quality tiered instruction. Tiered means everybody gets what's called Tier 1 instruction, which is student-centered instruction. There are also other tiers. Tier 2, Tier 3 is part of a model called the multi-tiered support system that provides additional strategies to students who need more support. But the big goal this year, and what I said to the teachers, is every single teacher has chosen one of these areas to go deeper in as their professional growth goal. So all teachers all year work on one goal. And what they were asked to do is choose, so maybe it's inquiry, maybe it's play-based learning, maybe you really want to understand the 5-step process of the design thinking protocol from Stanford. They're going to spend the year putting new methodology into their daily teaching. But it's all about this idea that the teacher no longer stands up here and just tells every student what to do. It's about what the students are able to do. So student-centered. This may seem like, no kidding, but this is massive for schools. For a long, long, long time, it was actually teacher-centered instruction. And we still have some of that, unfortunately. Performance reports, I mentioned that. We're not only continuing to work on these student dashboards, we're going to produce a school-wide dashboard for how we're doing against our mission. And then the spaces, this idea of flexible learning environments. Sure. So service learning really just, before you do service, you want to learn about what service is, what your impact is, making sure that you're not actually doing harm, things like that. UDL, Universal Design for Learning, basically a whole series of strategies that will help students learn, more student-centered strategies, things like that. It's just a methodology. And I want to show this video. So this idea of flexible learning environments is going to be a big theme for us. And we have about 15 schools that we benchmark against internationally, schools that we admire and feel are of the same quality. And space has been one of the biggest themes over the last 10 years for these schools. So this idea that space can be a teacher, the third teacher, is a really, really important concept for all of us to continue to explore. So let me see if I can get this to work. If you want to control students and control information, you create a box classroom and you put everybody in rows and the teacher stands up in front of a board and just disseminates information all day, right? But if you want to actually promote more social learning and give more options to students and have students have more exposure to different classmates or even teachers or things like that, you have to start to manipulate space. So I think Singapore American School, one of our benchmark schools, has a really nice job of summing up kind of this movement of what flexible learning looks like. They've taken their entire 6th grade and made it a flexible learning environment much further than we've gone in kindergarten. But we're starting to explore this idea as if we even take down half of a wall, what opportunity does that open up? And of course, the transition could be a little bit messy, and there are things that we're learning and making adjustments doing, but we're very interested in how we can take a very boxy school. Now, we're very fortunate to have all this space, but it's very boxy, and start to open it up. Now, open it up without causing chaos, but opening it up so that there's more opportunity and flexibility and options for students to interact and access their learning. This will be something we'll spend a lot more time talking about. Probably next year's talk will be on this. I always talk longer than I thought I am, so this was going to be a little activity to get you moving, so we won't do that. But here's what we're going to do. Do you have smartphones? I thought so. So what I want you to do is we're going to use a crowdsourcing website. It's actually a wiki survey called allOurIdeas.org. And I want you to take this URL, and if you type it in the way it is, so basically allOurIdeas.org /ASD Talk Tuesday 2019, you're going to see a whole bunch of choices. What I'm trying to do here is get a sense of how interested you are in the various options that are given to you. You're going to actually have 2 choices. You'll see the question, which is, what do you want more of at ASD? And you'll see 2 boxes. There'll be a box on the left that might say, I want more homework. There'll be a box on the right that says, I want more flexible learning spaces. And you can choose one or the other. Or you can say, I can't decide. There's a little prompt there. Or you can say, I actually want something else. And you can type that in. And that becomes one of the choices, and that choice gets filtered or distributed into this, this program. So we're going to take about 5 to 10 minutes and let you go through. Has anybody accessed the survey? Does it actually work?
Yeah,
So go through as many of those as you can. Add your own ideas, and then I'll show you what the results look like and how it works. Give it another 3 minutes. It might give you the same choice you've already seen. What it's doing is pairing. Yeah. So you might see it again. You can just, again, those 4 choices. Give it another 3 minutes and then I'll show you what the results were. Okay, so here are the results. This is a crowdsourcing tool that we sometimes use. And what it does is it creates these contests. So it pits one idea against the other, and it measures the strength that the idea has in the crowd that you source it with. So any score that would be 100 means it won every single contest that it was up against. If you had a score of 0, it lost every single pairing that it went through. If you hit 50, 50 is basically means it was a neutral concept to the community. It did not kind of get wins or losses, or it got both. So if you look at opportunities for acceleration, which got the highest score, a score of 74, which is quite strong, there were 178 contests where acceleration was in the mix. So very, very interesting, I have to say, about that. But that speaks to the fact that parents would like more rigor and more opportunities for students who are capable of it. So more college support, business and entrepreneurship, you can probably see these, but I'll read them out. STEM, social emotional learning, competency-based grouping, meaning not just grouping by age, but grouping by ability level, like in language or math or things like that. Service learning, internships and job shadows, all getting pretty strong results. Inspire, Week Without Walls, that's interesting, a little lukewarm.
Probably because of the price.
I say that, there's a little self-interest in that. We'd really like to reform these. What's getting bad results? Traditional homework, traditional classroom spaces, distance or online. That surprises me a little. What? Yeah.
I feel that some of them would benefit from more clarification.
Sure.
Because I know,
Yeah.
I saw that they were trying, it was pitting, as you said, one against the other. But some of them I sometimes put yes, but then I was lukewarm because I don't think they're going to get the answers because it sounds so
Yeah, this was that was a good point. This was off the cuff, kind of as many ideas as I could think of that might be worth pitting against. The idea that students would be able to take a course or something, even a small module online, a lot of experts are saying you actually should consider that as a graduation requirement, because if kids don't know how to use technology to learn, now I think most of if your children are like mine and go on YouTube to learn, or things, Khan Academy or stuff like that, they can figure that out. But the idea that you can learn through a computer from afar or a massive online course is being considered as one of those critical skills. So yes, some of these may not make sense or they need more explanation. Later start time for high school, that surprises me a little bit.
That would be perfect.
People not asking high school. You have to have a high schooler to care.
Yeah.
And that's also really neat.
Yeah, so why not? Yeah, so what we're doing, this was just a little fun activity. There are going to be a couple of opportunities to provide a lot more feedback, because this is a crowd of, I don't know, about 70 or so. Really would like to hear from our 1,200 families at ASD. So there's going to be a survey that goes out in October. That's kind of an organizational health survey, but it's also going to be a survey that asks, to what extent are we delivering on our mission? So there are going to be different categories for you. But we'll also do something like this that's more comprehensive, that explains the choices, because I really want to get a sense. This is a community school. So I'd like to know what the community thinks. It's not just about us as the experts in education to say this is what we think should happen. I want to hear what you want. So the fact that acceleration and also, mentioning business and STEM is way up there is really, really good information to know. One sec. The other opportunity is this Talk Tuesday is usually not an opportunity to ask a lot of questions. We hold a follow-up session that's just called Q&A with the superintendent, and we did that last year in early October. We'll do that again so that you can ask specifically kind of maybe something that struck you, you have more questions, and of course questions and comments and things like that. I just want to show one more slide and we'll wrap this up. And it has absolutely nothing to do with any of the content before, but I mentioned one of my passion projects was mindfulness. There's a specific method called mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR. This was developed by John Kabat-Zinn at the UMass Medical School about 40 years ago. And what it is basically mindfulness, which has kind of deep origins in the Eastern philosophy, but all the religion has been stripped out to where it's really just about techniques for breathing, techniques for movement, perspectives, mind perspectives of how you look at the world. So I've, over the last several years, been training to become an MBSR teacher, and I'm now qualified to teach the 8-week course. The 8-week course is basically one night a week over 8 weeks, plus one full day retreat where we work on mindfulness. We work on everything from breathing to some really low-grade meditations to a little bit of light yoga, but also just unpacking our perspectives. So I'm going to offer this course free of charge to parents, and we're going to have there'll be an announcement about this, but there's going to be kind of an intro session if you want to learn more about what this is and what we'd be doing together. So on Wednesday the 16th, probably in this room, but I'll send something out. Would invite you to come and consider this, and then if you're up for it, we'll, over the course of 8, either Tuesdays or Wednesdays, right leading up to the winter break, we'll spend about 2.5, 3 hours together to work through a very prescribed curriculum on this whole kind of concept of mindfulness. You've probably heard a lot about mindfulness. You see different things. The 8-week course was developed with scientific research and has been vetted many, many, many times and is probably about 40 years old. So it has its roots at UMass Medical, but it's kind of scoped a long ways. Anyways, that's that. We maybe can open it up for a couple questions or comments. We're already 7 minutes over, and I know I'm supposed to be other places. We are going to do a Q&A. You're going to get a chance to voice in a survey as well if you're not able to come to the Q&A. But let's do three comments or questions. Reem, did you have one? No?
Actually,
Maybe a new voice? Somebody who hasn't spoken yet? I think people want to leave. Yeah.
Sorry, real quick. I'm very new to ASD, new to the American system. We just moved from London. So my son went to an all-boys English pre-prep school.
Okay.
Transitioning into this new system. He's very happy, of course. So are we, because we like the idea of a flexible learning environment, not your traditional classroom.
Sure.
But I've noticed, being that we're in the 4th week, there's very little communication from the elementary school.
Okay.
And I can see that a lot of emphasis is given to the middle school and high school. Are we expecting any sort of communication, just so us as parents have some direction of what our children are learning?
Yeah, I mean, is it reasonable to have those expectations? Absolutely. I don't know specifically. I think the elementary principal is hiding out in the back, so he's listening. We'll touch base with that. Maybe actually you two can connect at the end of this to say specifically this is the sort of information that would be helpful. I'm not as aware of how each division pushes out communication. Reem, you do have a question?
yes, with regards to the survey,
Yeah.
when you do send it out, because other people had comments of high school, because us elementary parents don't know about high school students, et cetera, et cetera.
Differentiate
So maybe
it.
the survey would be elementary, middle, and
That makes sense.
that's all I wanted.
Okay, we can do that. This is just a little test. Last comment.
I just want to throw it out there. I just found out by accident this year, this is going on our 2nd year, that you guys have coaches for teachers.
Yes.
I think that's incredible, and I think you guys should say it.
I know.
There's all this good stuff. I used to be a parent at the school, and then I also taught at that school.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
And my mind was blown. I had been a parent for 5 years, and I never knew all the things they did.
So the American, thank you for mentioning that. We, for a long time, you probably notice a little bit more marketing externally than we've done in the past, and that is simply because it is a more competitive environment out there. We have a product that we feel is really good and really strong in the market. We don't tell anyone, even you, we don't tell. Other schools out there promise the world, and we question whether they actually deliver it or not. But coaches is a good example. ASD is known internationally as a place where they develop their teachers. And because we have instructional coaches and we have a board that commits to professional development with our teachers and through the budget, so that's one of probably our biggest draw. Our teachers don't come here because they're fascinated with Dubai and they want to live in the desert. They just don't. They come here because they've heard this is a great place to teach. This is a place they're going to grow. It's a really good community. And that's part of the mix. So you're right. We do need to share a lot more of what we're doing because we just assume that people know, but in a lot of cases you don't. So I'm going to end it there. I'm not going to run away. So if you just have a quick question or comment, I'll be here. Stay tuned for the Q&A and have a great week.